Sharing a bed with her was hard. Her gentle cries made it impossible to resist. Unexpected arrangements. The transport shuttle touched down on Valoria just as the first clouds began gathering on the horizon. Marcus Chen adjusted his diplomatic credentials badge and stepped onto the landing platform, immediately struck by the planet's perpetual twilight atmosphere. Everything here carried a hushed, elegant quality, from the architecture to the way attendants moved with practiced grace. Ambassador Chen. A woman's voice, cultured and precise, drew his attention. Lady Isadora Vale stood waiting, her posture immaculate in traditional Valorian formal wear that somehow managed to be both modest and striking. Dark hair swept back from a face that revealed little emotion, though her eyes held an evaluating intelligence that Marcus recognized from his briefing materials. Lady Isadora. He inclined his head respectfully. Thank you for meeting me personally. The circumstances require it, I'm afraid. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered there. Was it annoyance? Amusement? There's been an issue with the accommodations. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the doorway of what should have been his private suite, staring at the problem. One bedroom. Admittedly spacious, with a bed large enough for 3 people, but still decidedly singular. The storm season bookings are impossible, Isadora explained from behind him, her voice carefully modulated. Every residence within the secure diplomatic quarter is occupied. This was the last available space, and given tomorrow's negotiations. She trailed off, the implication clear. We need to be here, Marcus finished. He turned to face her, keeping his expression professional despite the awkwardness settling between them. I can sleep on the sofa in the sitting room. Don't be ridiculous. That thing is antique and approximately as comfortable as sleeping on marble. Isadora moved past him into the bedroom, surveying it with the same analytical gaze she'd given him earlier. We're both adults. The bed is large enough that we needn't even acknowledge each other's presence. Marcus wasn't sure that was entirely possible, but he nodded. Professional boundaries. Exactly. She set her small travel case down with finality. I'll take the left side. I rise early for meditation, so I'll be quite quiet. That first evening passed in a dance of careful avoidance. Marcus reviewed negotiation documents in the sitting room while Isadora occupied the bedroom, the door slightly ajar, enough for propriety, not enough to suggest intimacy. When she emerged in sleeping clothes that were somehow both concealing and graceful, Marcus retreated to change in the bathroom, giving her space. The bed might have been large, but Marcus was acutely aware of every sound as they settled in, backs to each other, a respectful distance maintained. Isadora's breathing was measured, controlled. He wondered if she was actually sleeping or just performing it convincingly. Outside, the wind began to pick up. Tomorrow would bring storms, the attendants had warned. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to focus on anything except the subtle scent of jasmine that seemed to emanate from his unexpected roommate's side of the bed. This would be a long night. Possibly a long several nights. Sharing a bed with her was hard. Her gentle cries made it impossible to resist. Unexpected arrangements. The transport shuttle touched down on Valoria just as the first clouds began gathering on the horizon. Marcus Chen adjusted his diplomatic credentials badge and stepped onto the landing platform, immediately struck by the planet's perpetual twilight atmosphere. Everything here carried a hushed, elegant quality, from the architecture to the way attendants moved with practiced grace. Ambassador Chen. A woman's voice, cultured and precise, drew his attention. Lady Isadora Vale stood waiting, her posture immaculate in traditional Valorian formal wear that somehow managed to be both modest and striking. Dark hair swept back from a face that revealed little emotion, though her eyes held an evaluating intelligence that Marcus recognized from his briefing materials. Lady Isadora. He inclined his head respectfully. Thank you for meeting me personally. The circumstances require it, I'm afraid. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered there. Was it annoyance? Amusement? There's been an issue with the accommodations. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the doorway of what should have been his private suite, staring at the problem. One bedroom. Admittedly spacious, with a bed large enough for 3 people, but still decidedly singular. The storm season bookings are impossible, Isadora explained from behind him, her voice carefully modulated. Every residence within the secure diplomatic quarter is occupied. This was the last available space, and given tomorrow's negotiations. She trailed off, the implication clear. We need to be here, Marcus finished. He turned to face her, keeping his expression professional despite the awkwardness settling between them. I can sleep on the sofa in the sitting room. Don't be ridiculous. That thing is antique and approximately as comfortable as sleeping on marble. Isadora moved past him into the bedroom, surveying it with the same analytical gaze she'd given him earlier. We're both adults. The bed is large enough that we needn't even acknowledge each other's presence. Marcus wasn't sure that was entirely possible, but he nodded. Professional boundaries. Exactly. She set her small travel case down with finality. I'll take the left side. I rise early for meditation, so I'll be quite quiet. That first evening passed in a dance of careful avoidance. Marcus reviewed negotiation documents in the sitting room while Isadora occupied the bedroom, the door slightly ajar, enough for propriety, not enough to suggest intimacy. When she emerged in sleeping clothes that were somehow both concealing and graceful, Marcus retreated to change in the bathroom, giving her space. The bed might have been large, but Marcus was acutely aware of every sound as they settled in, backs to each other, a respectful distance maintained. Isadora's breathing was measured, controlled. He wondered if she was actually sleeping or just performing it convincingly. Outside, the wind began to pick up. Tomorrow would bring storms, the attendants had warned. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to focus on anything except the subtle scent of jasmine that seemed to emanate from his unexpected roommate's side of the bed. This would be a long night. Possibly a long several nights. Walls come down. The darkness made it easier somehow, easier to be honest, to let words flow without the weight of eye contact and careful expressions. Marcus found himself talking about things he rarely shared, the loneliness of diplomatic life, the way he'd learned to present a version of himself that was competent and controlled but never quite complete. Is that why your engagement ended? Isadora's question was gentle, not prying. Because you couldn't stop being the diplomat long enough to be just. Marcus. He exhaled slowly. Partly. Mostly it was that she wanted someone who could promise to stay, to build a life in one place. And I couldn't give her that. The old ache was duller now, but still present. I told myself it was noble, choosing duty over personal happiness. But I think I was just afraid. Of what? Of being that vulnerable with someone. Of letting someone see all the parts of me I keep hidden. He turned his head toward her, though he could only make out her outline. Of exactly the kind of conversation we're having right now, actually. He heard her shift, moving closer. Not touching, but near enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. I understand that fear more than you know. Tell me. It was his turn to ask for honesty. What are you afraid of, Isadora? The silence stretched, broken only by the steady drumming of rain. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion he'd never heard from her before. 8 years ago, my younger brother drowned during a storm like this. Flash flooding in the lower districts. He was only 16. Her breath caught. I was supposed to meet him that day. I was late because of a council meeting that ran long. When I finally got there. Marcus acted on instinct, closing the distance between them and taking her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Isadora, I'm so sorry. Everyone told me it wasn't my fault. That there was nothing I could have done. She gripped his hand tightly, as if anchoring herself. But I learned to control everything I could after that. My schedule, my emotions, my image. If I could just be perfect enough, disciplined enough, maybe I could prevent anything else terrible from happening. That's an impossible weight to carry. I know. She laughed softly, bitterly. Intellectually, I know. But storms remind me of that night, of losing him, of how little control we really have over anything that matters. Marcus found himself pulling her closer, and she came willingly, her head resting against his shoulder. The gesture felt both momentous and completely natural. You don't have to be perfect right now. Not with me. I don't feel perfect with you. Her voice was muffled against his shirt. I feel raw, exposed. And somehow that's not as terrifying as I thought it would be. They stayed like that as the storm raged on, her body gradually relaxing against his. Marcus stroked her hair without thinking, the gesture soothing for both of them. Time seemed suspended, the outside world reduced to just the two of them in the darkness. Marcus. Her voice was drowsy now, exhaustion finally winning over anxiety. Thank you. For tonight. For seeing me. He pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, surprising himself with the tenderness of it. Thank you for letting me. As her breathing evened out into sleep, Marcus remained awake, holding her. Something fundamental had shifted between them. Tomorrow they'd have to face what this meant, navigate the complications of duty and desire. But for now, in the storm-wrapped darkness, they were simply two people who'd found unexpected shelter in each other. The thunder seemed softer now, or perhaps he just wasn't paying attention to it anymore. All his focus was on the woman in his arms and the realization that he was already in far deeper than he'd ever intended to be. The line blurs. Dawn was approaching, the storm's fury finally subsiding into a steady, gentle rain. Marcus had drifted in and out of sleep, but never deeply, too aware of Isadora's warmth against him, the way she'd unconsciously curled closer during the night, her hand resting over his heart. When she stirred, he felt the exact moment consciousness returned and her body stiffened with awareness of their position. I fell asleep on you, she murmured, not moving away immediately. I didn't mean to. I didn't mind. His arms were still around her, and neither of them seemed eager to break the contact. How are you feeling? Like I revealed far too much. But there was no real regret in her voice, just a kind of wonder. And somehow, lighter for it. She lifted her head to look at him, and in the grey pre-dawn light filtering through the windows, Marcus could see her face clearly now. Her hair was tousled, her usual perfect composure completely absent, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. We should probably talk about this, he said softly. About what happens now. Should we? Isadora's fingers traced an absent pattern on his chest. Or should we just see where this goes without overanalyzing it? That doesn't sound like you. Perhaps I'm tired of being the version of me everyone expects. Her eyes held his, something bold and vulnerable mixing in their depths. Perhaps I want to be the version of me that exists when I'm with you. The words hung between them, an invitation and a confession. Marcus felt his careful control slipping, years of diplomatic restraint warring with the desire that had been building since the moment they'd met. Isadora. Her name was both a warning and a plea. She shifted, rising onto her elbow so she was looking down at him. Tell me you haven't thought about this. About us. I've thought about little else, he admitted, his hand coming up to cup her face. But there are complications. There are always complications. She leaned closer, her lips hovering just above his. I'm choosing this anyway. Choosing you. If you'll have me. Marcus's restraint shattered. He closed the distance between them, capturing her mouth in a kiss that held weeks of suppressed longing. Isadora responded immediately, her lips parting beneath his, soft and eager and perfect. The kiss deepened, becoming less tentative and more desperate, as if they were both trying to make up for lost time. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound of pleasure that sent heat rushing through him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her eyes were dark with desire. Come here, he murmured, guiding her to straddle his lap, kneading her closer still. The thin barrier of their sleeping clothes felt like too much separation. God, Isadora, you're... Don't talk. She kissed him again, her hands sliding beneath his shirt, exploring the planes of his chest. I'm tired of words. They fell into each other with an urgency born of revelation, the discovery that vulnerability could lead not just to connection but to this, to passion and tenderness intertwined. Marcus mapped her body with reverent hands, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. She was equally exploratory, her usual control giving way to unguarded need. When she pulled back to remove her sleep shirt, Marcus caught her hands. Are you sure? We don't have to. I've never been more sure of anything. Her smile was radiant, transformative. I want this. I want you. The grey dawn light painted her skin in silver as they came together, all pretense and barriers finally dissolved. Their lovemaking was slow and intense, punctuated by whispered confessions and gasped names. Marcus had been with other women, but never like this, never with this sense of seeing and being seen completely, of two people meeting without masks or roles. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, skin against skin, Isadora traced lazy patterns on his shoulder. That was... She laughed softly. I don't have diplomatic words for what that was. Neither do I. Marcus kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. But I know I want more of it. More of you. We have negotiations today. Her tone was practical, but she made no move to leave his arms. We'll need to face the world eventually. Eventually, he agreed. But not quite yet. Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind a clean-washed morning. But inside their shared room, Marcus and Isadora remained in their own private world, reluctant to let reality intrude on what they'd found. Morning brings clarity. The rising sun eventually forced them from bed, though not without lingering kisses and reluctant separations. Marcus watched Isadora move around the room, gathering her formal clothes, and marveled at how different she seemed now, the same grace and elegance, but with a new ease in her movements, as if she'd shed some invisible weight. You're staring, she said without turning around, amusement in her voice. Can you blame me? He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck. I'm fairly certain I'm not supposed to be this happy before breakfast. She turned in his arms, her expression growing serious. Marcus, we do need to talk about the practicalities. The negotiations, our positions, the fact that this. She gestured between them. This could complicate things significantly. I know. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I'm not willing to pretend last night didn't happen. Are you? No. Her answer was immediate and firm. But we need to be smart about this. Careful. They moved to the sitting room, ordering breakfast and settling into the chairs with a new kind of comfort between them. As they ate, they talked through the logistics, how to maintain professional boundaries in public while acknowledging their personal connection, how to ensure their relationship wouldn't compromise the negotiations. I think, Isadora said thoughtfully, stirring her tea, that we should be honest with our respective delegations. Not the intimate details, obviously, but the fact that we've developed feelings. It's better they hear it from us than discover it through gossip. Marcus nodded, impressed by her pragmatism. Agreed. And in the negotiations themselves. We do our jobs. We advocate for our people's interests. We don't let this influence our professional judgment. She met his eyes steadily. Can you do that? Yes. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Can you? I believe so. Though I'll admit, it's strange to realize I trust you with both my heart and my planet's future. A small smile played at her lips. Usually I'm more cautious about both. Usually I am too. Marcus brought her hand to his lips. But something about sharing a bed with you during a storm seems to have destroyed my sense of caution entirely. The negotiations that day were intense, as expected. But Marcus found himself watching Isadora with new eyes, seeing the brilliant diplomat everyone else saw, but also recognizing the vulnerable woman who trembled in his arms during thunder, who trusted him with her grief and her desire. When their eyes met across the negotiating table, there was a secret warmth there, a private understanding that made even the most contentious discussions bearable. During a break, one of Marcus's advisors pulled him aside. Sir, I notice some chemistry between you and Lady Isadora. Should we be concerned? Marcus considered his response carefully. You should be aware that Lady Isadora and I have developed a personal relationship. However, I can assure you it won't compromise my commitment to securing favorable terms for our interests. If anything, the mutual respect we've built makes productive negotiation more likely. The advisor looked skeptical but nodded. Just be careful, sir. These things can get complicated. They already are complicated, Marcus admitted. But some complications are worth it. That evening, after the formal sessions ended, Marcus and Isadora walked together through the diplomatic quarters gardens, the air fresh and clean after the storm. They didn't touch, too many eyes watching, but walked close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. My advisor told me I should be careful with you, Isadora said quietly. Mine said the same. Are you going to be careful? Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the twilight, she was luminous, and he felt the full weight of what was beginning between them. No, I don't think I am. I think I'm going to be reckless and hopeful and probably make a mess of things occasionally. But I'm going to do it with you, if you'll have me. Her smile was radiant. I think that's the least diplomatic thing I've ever heard you say. Good. I'm tired of diplomacy when it comes to us. He glanced around, confirming they were momentarily alone, and risked taking her hand. What do you say, Lady Isadora? Want to be reckless with me? More than anything, she whispered. They stood there in the garden, hands joined, as the stars began to emerge overhead. The negotiations would continue, their duties would remain, and complications would inevitably arise. But they'd found something rare and precious in that storm-tossed night, the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to choose connection over safety. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And somehow, that made all the difference. As they finally made their way back to their shared suite, a space that was no longer awkward but felt like a sanctuary, Marcus realized that sometimes the best diplomatic victories weren't the treaties you negotiated, but the human connections you built along the way. And this connection, forged in darkness and vulnerability and unexpected passion, felt like the beginning of something that could last far beyond any diplomatic mission. Isadora's hand in his, Marcus smiled at the thought of all the storms they'd weather together, both literal and metaphorical, and knew without doubt that he'd found exactly where he was meant to be. The end.